Right. Brothers and sisters, good day to you all. May I introduce myself? I'm Claude Robertson Dunn, a former General Secretary of the Eastern Central African Section, and I'm most happy to be able to chair this second symposium. The subject of which I think most of you will know is brotherhood as a road to awareness. We have three speakers, all of whom is a General Secretary or a former General Secretary. So we can look forward to an enlightening talk. Our first speaker is very well known in Europe and is the General Secretary for the French section, Ms. Tran Kim Dieu. Kim Dieu is a postgraduate in pharmaceutical engineering. She has served in various capacities in the French section and is now its General Secretary. She was re-elected chairperson of the Council of the European Federation, and during 1991 to 99, she regularly gave talks in Eastern Europe, including Russia and the Ukraine, and helped to publish theosophical literature in both languages. Apart from giving a monthly course at headquarters in Paris since 1987, she is a regular lecturer at summer schools, conventions, the European School of Theosophy, Crotona, and the School of Wisdom at Adyar. It gives me great pleasure, therefore, to invite Ms. Kim Dieu to start off this symposium, the subject of which is brotherhood as a road to awareness. Ms. Kim Dieu.
Thank you. Good morning, friends. We are all watched over the webcast. So, good morning, bonjour, guten Tag, good morgen, bon dia, and buenos dias. Let us take as a sign of rally this symbol. It is not the sign of victory, what Churchill showed, but it is the W, it is work, work, and work. This is to rally all workers over the world. Now, let me share a few thoughts with you. More than once, I have been told that there are people who are more fraternal outside the Theosophical Society than inside it. I must confess that on each occasion, I felt relieved. Indeed, with less than 30,000 members of the TS, assuming that all the members are more or less fraternal, compared to 6,000 million humans, one cannot but be very happy with the observation and cannot but hope that it is true. And there is truth in it. The nucleus of brotherhood, which is to be formed according to the first object of our society, is actually in the forming. It means that it is not yet totally formed. A TS member in particular, or any human being in general, who has reached a certain level of education and understanding would see brotherhood as a necessity. In fact, it stands for the leading object of the trilogy of objects of our society. It forms the condition, first, to live in peace with the surroundings and with oneself. Second, to discover something wider and deeper in the field of consciousness. And third, to realize fully the experience of truth. Let us consider the 3 points. Firstly, brotherhood is a necessity in order to live in peace with the surroundings. One must come to a point in the mind where there is distinction. One cannot maintain the separation of friends and foes. One must come to the point in the mind where this distinction between friends and foes vanishes. Who are they then in front of you, in front of me, if they are neither friends or foes? Just human beings striving for survival most of the time. Human beings often attached to possessions, to that little piece of that they call recognition or prestige. Those humans are mainly unconsciously threatened by the after death and half consciously frightened by death. Death is the terminus of the train of this life on which you and I are traveling and sharing the same lot. During the journey en route to the terminus, travelers frequently quarrel over petty disputes. When they gather together into families, clans, tribes, etc., the quarrels morph into war. As a side effect to war, many phenomena can be observed. Sometimes the clans calm down, but some factions, out of personal interest or personal weaknesses, maintain the climate of tension in order to take hold of the situation or at least wield influence. All know that throughout the world, some special people always make profit from war. But the train is running inevitably towards its terminus. The families, the clans, the factions, inexorably will be swept away. Some people would say, never mind, I don't mind, I have got what I wanted. And while taking action, they forget the aftermath. Others who are to some extent aware of the situation, of the train bringing all to the end, would not initiate conflict. The stake goes beyond this life. The next question is how to avoid conflict. Conflict begins in one's consciousness before externalizing itself to the surroundings. This implies that in order to be in peace with the surroundings, one must be at peace with oneself. Inward peace can by no means be earned without a clean life, a pure heart, and some understanding leading in due course to insight. There is no other way to go. I think that even though one cannot totally realize this, one can have a taste of it. Secondly, in order to discover something wider and deeper in the field of consciousness, I said that brotherhood is a necessity. It is just because the discovery of something wider and deeper needs a unified field inside consciousness, a state where there is no dichotomy, or at least not at all the time, no dichotomy between one and the other, between this and that. Any discovery of importance and of an essential order demands this unified state of consciousness, where the dualistic mind transcends itself in an undivided wholeness. This state is elsewhere called awareness or intelligence in action. Only a quiet mind is apt to host awareness. Therefore, an agitated mind lives in a state of unintelligence. The discovery of deeper levels of consciousness leads to intelligence or insight that would give hints to the nature of truth. Thirdly, brotherhood is a necessity in order to realize the experience of truth. Truth is the object of the occultist search. It is reality for the scientist and the ultimate for the mystics or the supreme. Truth is also the ultimate object of any genuine inquirer. In order to investigate unexplained law of nature and the powers latent in man, as stated in the third object of our society, brotherhood must be realized to some extent, as well as some deepening of the study. Approaching truth does not mean explaining it. How can one explain and convey truth, since it is bare as such? Any attempt of explain or define it, any attempt to explain or define it would rather defile it and make more confusion. Yet, undeniably, experiencing truth belongs to an individual's living. The whole process occurs within the individual's consciousness. The experience of truth, therefore, is necessarily subjective. But the subjectivity of this experience cannot be assimilated with any experience of virtual reality, in which a great part of imagination is involved to create a virtual reality. The experience of reality or truth, despite its subjectivity, is a real experience lived by the individual consciousness, inside the whole one consciousness, without the imprint of imagination. So brotherhood, viewed from the angle of activity, is a necessity. Viewed from the angle of the intellect, it is a state of natural relationship where there is still the distinction of you and I. Nevertheless, the relationship does not let itself overshadow either by the burden of hierarchy or by the gloom of jealousy, or still by some confusion of roles. It stands for a mind where there is no ambition for oneself and no expectation of others. This natural state recalls the state of innocence described by the Taoist philosopher Chuang Tzu, who wrote about the time when life was full. Quote, "In the age when life on earth was full, no one paid any special attention to worthy men, nor did they single out the men of ability. Rulers were simply the highest branches on the tree, and the people were like deer in the woods. They were honest and righteous without realizing that they were doing their duty. They loved each other and did not know that this was love of neighbor. They deceived no one, yet they did not know that they were men to be trusted. They were reliable and did not know that this was good faith. They lived freely together, giving, taking, and did not know that they were generous. For this reason, their deeds have not been narrated. They made no history." End quote. Alas, history has been written ever since. Where is now the freshness of innocence? Guilelessness is lost. What is to be done to try to form a nucleus of brotherhood? It is what we are trying to do, aren't we? It is quite clear that when life was full, meaning no division, and unfolded itself without self, meaning according to Tao, the way of heaven or the divine, there was no point to raise the issue of virtue. When Tao is lost, comes virtue. When virtue is lost, come the right, meaning the law and morality. Likewise, when innocence is lost, comes brotherhood. When brotherhood is lost, comes the notion of justice, fairness, and its procession. Brotherhood generates from this state of innocence where love has not yet fallen into the corruption of being named. Brotherhood generates from this state of innocence where love has not yet fallen into the corruption of being named, but spontaneously spring out in care and service. If service were understood not to be serving humanity's selfishness, brotherhood cannot be lived as a privilege received and bestowed over one limited population, clan, family, ethnics, etc. If brotherhood is to be the road to awareness, this road precisely must trace the way of returning to the original innocence, where there is no inward struggling producive of external conflict. This state of innocence exalts the universal ethics, which is definitely neither morality nor a matter to be codified. So, being more than a necessity for peace of mind, for wider consciousness, or for experience of truth, and more than a natural firstborn from innocence, brotherhood stands for the dynamics of relationship. Let us explore further this observation. We all agree that life is a network of relationships. To be related generally implies to be implicated in some form of kinship, friendship, or acquaintance. But what does one have as relationship with a man in the street? He and one are sharing the state of humanity. But is it all? a special factor is to be added: solidarity. The solidarity of being a human. Solidarity has further and deeper meaning than just giving food to the poor or assisting people in need. Solidarity implies respecting others' dignity, and while doing so, respecting one's own dignity, and vice versa. Even more than that, when one meets somebody, what prevails in the mind of each party? Do we meet him with a prejudice in mind? Is he a friend? Yes, definitely. He paid for my expenses. Is he not in my camp? Certainly not. He kept on gossiping about me, etc., etc. Krishnamurti emphasizes that mostly one does not really, truly meet another. The so-called meeting is just a juxtaposition of images, of virtual realities, of respective egos, sometimes clashing against each other, sometimes mutually flattering in order to get round difficulties or to get rewards according to one's own hope and expectation. Is there any genuineness at all in relationship? Or do we just want to get by? Brotherhood cannot be lived without awareness. The awareness of being genuine to oneself, of being upright, honest towards oneself and towards others. This integrity can be felt alongside the movement of hidden motivations, which are under control and clearly seen. Integrity must be lived by oneself for its own sake and not for any reputation or any moral or material reward. Because life in its wholeness of fulfillment and ultimate expression, life is incorruptible. Then is brotherhood a road to awareness? Or rather, is not awareness a road to brotherhood and to other states of consciousness? Awareness seems to be the foundation of virtues. Why are we not fraternal? Isn't it because all kinds of motivations mask the inner vision so that only the immediate purpose is spotted in the scope of consciousness? How many times have we failed to be aware of our own state of mind? The border between skill and action, as yoga, and hypocrisy is very thin as the border of unintelligent cleverness and madness. Without awareness and without integrity, these borders might be ignored unknowingly or knowingly. In his speech at the Oman camp, before the well-known "Truth is the Pathless Land," Jiddu Krishnamurti exhorted the audience, quote, "I speak of that self on which all things depend and from which all transformation arises. That self is in everyone. And I say, if you want that glory, that strength, which is liberation, which is truth, you must look to that self and put everything aside." End quote. Looking to that self and put everything aside will lead to the actual seeing of a situation, of people, and of oneself. That means the whole. In order to be more accurate, one should say the seeing of the whole of the self leads to the seeing of situations, people, and of relationship. This seeing gives to relationship liveliness and the flavor of freshness and innocence. From the inner side of things, it means one is dying to oneself, for no self can survive when awareness is in action. And Krishnamurti continued, quote, "Of what use is a vast horde of people who always compromise, a vast number who are uncertain, vague, frightened, and doubtful? Of what use is that horde of people who always compromise, a vast number who are uncertain, vague, frightened, and doubtful?" Quote, end quote. As earlier said, the nucleus of brotherhood, which is to be formed, according to the first object of our society, is actually in the forming. To be in the forming means not yet totally formed. Humanity is our tank, and brotherhood is always in the forming. It is like flocks of wild geese flying in the sky. Their composition changes according to the epoch, but always there are flocks flying. The questions are still to be asked. Are you, am I, uncertain, vague, frightened, and doubtful? Am I compromising? Are you compromising? The forming of the nucleus of brotherhood depends upon each one's soul searching an answer. And the answer belongs to all. It has its validity in the background of consciousness. It means an uncompromising, constant awareness.